Hello and welcome to the first podcast series in our EU project Orchestra. We will go a little bit more deeply into what Orchestra is, what it is for, but a short hint, it's about future traffic management. In this first podcast series or a video cast podcast series, we will have a short discussion with partners from Orchestra. We will deep dive a little bit who they are, what do they bring to the table from a traffic management perspective. Today, introducing Michele Nati from IOTA. We will hear their view and his view about why they joined Orchestra, who they are, and we look very much forward talking to you today, Michele, and welcome to the first series of the Orchestra podcast. Hi.
Hello, hi Jenny. Hi, all the listeners of this podcast. Thank you for Orchestra to this interesting initiative. My name is Michele Nati. I am the head of infrastructure development at IOTA Foundation, and as part of that, I manage different European projects. Most of them are focusing on how to use distributed ledger technologies, which is the main core of our business in different domains, in different sectors. So we are very welcome to join Orchestra and to be part of this project to explore what we can do together with other partners in the traffic management system ecosystem.
Very nice to have you here on board. Thank you for that introduction. Before we start to hear more about IOTA, maybe just a couple of words of who you are. We don't need to go into age in this series, but maybe who you are, a little bit about your background, because it's always interesting to know a little bit about the person we are seeing or listening to.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. I start saying that I am the head of infrastructure development at IOTA, but before that, I had a career that went from Internet of Things to data and finally to distributed ledger. In fact, I graduated almost 20 years ago now, and then got a PhD on wireless sensor network, which actually now turned to be Internet of Things, which are actually the core of modern transport systems, all the sensor data deployed on streets or cars or whatever. So this is the Internet of Things. So I had experience with that, quite broad experience on that. I'm actually was working in academia on research topic related to Internet of Things, also Internet of Things related to mobility and so on and so forth. After that, I start to look more into not only the infrastructure for collecting data and how secure this should be, but also on the value of this data and how this data can be actually also personal data. If you think about data in cars, they not only tell us about the car behavior, but also the driver behavior. So all this data need to be protected. So I work as a personal data expert for a government organization in England called Digital Catapult. And finally, I land to IOTA Foundation, where I'm actually combining all this passion about Internet of Things, sensor data, personal data, and the security that distributed ledger technology can bring.
So you say 20 years. If we go straight to the material, then how do you see that if we think about Internet of Things is for us normal people not having the experience you have, is connecting things to a larger system, if we simplify. But how do you see that has changed during those 20 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's changed a lot. So when I start my research, when I say 20 years is when I start my research as a student that need to graduate, and then as a researcher, the main problem was that the device, now the main Internet of Things device we think about is our mobile phone or device connected in our house. But in the past, main wireless sensor network technology were all this monitoring infrastructure, like for agriculture, for road and transport and bridges and so on and so forth. And they didn't have the capability and the capacity, the battery life to connect to the internet. So they have to create mesh network, mainly using different protocols. And back then, the challenge was actually how we can make this device be able to send their information, that's what they sense about the environment, to a final point of collection. And unfortunately, this has to go through multi-hop communication. So one device talk to the other, then talk to the other, and finally this end up to an aggregator. And finally, this aggregator is the only one that have network capability to connect to the internet. Now we have narrowband IoT, low power wide area network, all this sort of technology that allow more point-to-point communication that expand the range of hundreds of meters. So all the devices are actually be able to be IoT, internet-enabled device. In the past, we had just wireless device that can connect and can send data. And sending this data and be sure that the data arrive to the destination was a very challenging task because of the limitation of the device, the limitation of the battery need to be done very well. And back then, we were researching how to make this possible. Now, finally, IoT, it's an emerging technology that we can use as a backbone for many other scenario use cases, much more established. And finally, we can start to use it, not only research it.
I see. This is all very interesting. I'm going to try not to be too technical and to go into details, but you mentioned in the beginning, and I think we need to, for our audience, to explain what is distributed ledger technology. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a question that I receive many times, and most of the time the question is actually, can you explain like I was 5 or something like this, or it's my grandmother that had to know about that. So yeah, distributed ledger technology, basically it's a distributed database where information shared between two parties is stored in different repositories, let's call this way, and there is no need for a central authority that guarantees that this information doesn't change over time, is not modified by one of the party. And in the most common word, this is done by using what is called a third-party authority. So basically you have your cloud provider, you put the data there, and you expect that this data don't change. If they change, maybe there is a way to investigate this from the cloud provider. So with blockchain and distributed technology, you do this by removing this third-party needs. So this makes communication between two parties that don't trust each other much more easier to establish. Data goes into the distributed ledger and they are trusted without any further commitment from a third party. And this is good for data, but for blockchain, the main idea was that this is good also for payments. So when I need to pay a person, I don't need to rely on a bank that says, Michele has this money, and the person take part of this money as a result of a payment that Michele performed. And this is how the normal world works, but this of course include cost. And of course, cut out the person that don't have a bank account to be involved in this sort of economy. If you think about third world country where there is a lot of unbanked people, without blockchain, they cannot be part of this economic system. With blockchain, they can, because they can have their own accounts, they can have their own tokens, and they can trade and they can exchange token without the need of being registering one third-party institution. So this was the initial novelty brought by blockchain.
Okay, we'll come back to that, but what I want to understand is as well about how IOTA and distributed ledger technology fits into this project. And I'm just going to give our audience a short background about Orchestra. It's about the future traffic management and the long-term vision of Orchestra, which is an EU-funded project, is a future where it's easy to coordinate and synchronize the traffic management of all modes: sea, land, air, and sea, land, air, and rail. Thank you, Michele. To cope with the diverse demands and situation. And we're already starting to see that a combined traffic management is actually very much needed when we talk about the air flight chaos, the transport chaos that exists in Europe, etc. There are 16 partners in Orchestra. As it said, it's an EU-funded project and it's coordinated by ITS Norway. So IOTA is a partner in the project. How does your vision fit into the traffic management vision of Orchestra?
No, thank you. Yeah, that's very, very interesting to discuss this. Let me take a step back, first of all. When I said what is the novelty brought by blockchain or distributed ledger, IOTA is a distributed ledger. People listening to us may be more familiar with the term blockchain. The difference is that you achieve the same properties, the same immutability on the data you share without requiring a third party. But in a blockchain world, usually you achieve this with paying some fees to the network to maintain this information for you to be trusted. In IOTA, you don't need that. We develop a sort of new world set of protocols that allow to do this without extra fees. And what makes this very interesting is that you can actually share data using the IOTA ledger. And like you said before, multimodal transport management will be much more effective and efficient if data start to flow between the different domains. So far, the domain are all silent because of this, because there is a risk when sharing data with another domain that this data can be tampered, modified, not used in the right way. That, for instance, some of the information about one domain might be exposed to attacker, might be exposed to hacker, and so on and so forth. So what you need a trusted platform that allows you to share information in a way that is secure, safe, and information can be trusted by the recipient, by the different domain that receive information from the other. And that's what IOTA makes possible, because it provides the technology, provides the infrastructure that have no cost for being used, has very low energy and CO2 impact, because the energy consumed by the IOTA ledger is very low. And that's the perfect platform that allows this ecosystem of actors to actually exchange the data, the information that they want and they need in order to optimize the traffic flow in their different domains. So if you think about, for instance, a delayed train arriving at the station, taxi might be needed at that station in response to this situation, and data on the taxi distribution belongs to the taxi operator. Data about the delay of a train belongs to the rail operator. How the rail operator or the taxi operator can share information in a secure way. They will have to appoint a third party. Too much complexity, because these ecosystems are always different, or they can use a distributed ledger technology to do that and be safe and secure that the data that they're sharing only gets into the hands of who actually they want this data to be accessed. In this case, either the rail company or, on the other hand, the taxi company. So with distributed ledger, we can make this ecosystem of transport to talk in a much more agile way and still in a secure way.
And also safe would be the word here as well.
Absolutely, safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think
this
that is
to,
sorry, yes. Please. You.
No, this brings also to another, let's say, possibility that distributed ledger enable, because distributed ledger have as well the ability to create, without going into much detail, decentralized identity systems. So they create again a backbone, which is called a public key infrastructure, which is not owned again by a central authority. And this allows actually to verify where this data comes from. So if you start to think about sensor data now, and I think about data that are in the rail or in the station that monitor the arrival and departure of the train, I want to be sure, on the other hand, that actually this data comes from a real sensor, it's not somebody else. And this belongs to safety, because I can otherwise very easily fake the data and create some kind of maybe not real congestion. Crowd control can go crazy because they think they're arriving too much train, too many passenger at the station, and they need to react on that only because it's fake data generated by fake device. With distributed ledger technology, we can create again a safe and decentralized and secure identity system that allows to verify if an information is real or an information is fake. It's an attempt to create some kind of destruction. So, and this is translating to, as an overall result, that the whole system, the transport system, is safe itself, because we prevent this kind of attack.
Well, that's very interesting, and that's very important when we talk about the multimodal coordination across both modes, but also the transport authorities. How much, you mentioned there earlier also about the protocols, but how much do you involve yourself in standardization? Because when talking about data, we also need to have that in standardized modes. Luckily, EU has the Data Act now, so that for the future handling of data should be more easy because of the standardized way. But do you, as a IOTA, do you involve yourself in the process as well?
Yeah, IOTA is involved in the process of basically standardizing mainly the ledger operation. Mainly we standardize how the transactions, because when you store a data on the ledger, basically you perform a so-called transaction. And we are very much involved into this kind of standardization. We are involved in the standardization on how, let's say, that's another term, smart contracts, which are basically a piece of software that not only can allow the ledger to share data, but also to perform computation on the ledger data in a way that is trusted. Again, doesn't require to trust this party to run the software, but is the system running the software and you trust that. We're involved in that. We're involved also in the standardization activity for what it concerns the identity system that we can attach to IoT device, sensor, and so on and so forth. What we are not involved is the standardization activities in the transport data ecosystem, but for one reason, because the ledger is flexible enough to accommodate all the different data that the transport system has to exchange. And actually, our work in Orchestra is actually learning from the expert in the transport domain. What are these data? What are the standards? And then not contribute to them, but be sure that the ledger can transfer this data from one part to another according to standards. So we just do work on adapting our ledger to the standard the transport system requires.
Very good. That's very interesting to hear, because it is and becomes more important as well. How do you see your role in Orchestra? Or let me phrase it this way: what do you think is the most important part? Do you think is the most important with the Orchestra project, from your perspective, but also as from the project perspective?
From the project perspective, also as part of one of the work package in Orchestra, our activity was to understand actually what the community of practitioners, this is how we call inside Orchestra project, the expert on the transport system. And those are, again, in different domains, like you said, and we asked them what kind of barriers they see for the creation of more advanced multimodal system and traffic management on multimodal system. And one of the main challenge for them was, again, about the security of data and the fact that they don't trust how data that they collect in their domain can be used. And basically, based on that, we actually try to design our own role. And our main role is actually that one of enabling this ecosystem to share data in a trusted way. So that's the first. And the second, it's about enabling not only data about cars or sensor on the road and so on and so forth, but also enabling managing of people and managing of crowd. And again, this comes by collecting personal data, and we want to keep this data protected. And what we are doing, we learn as well that we can use the ledger and the decentralized identity system to enable different transport providers to better know the preferences of passenger, of traveler, and so on and so forth in a more GDPR compliant way. So at the end of the project, we hope we will provide two tools. One is for secure data sharing across this ecosystem, and the other is for managing transport credential for passenger, especially in case of disruption. So if a passenger has to be rerouted from one transport mean to another, it can be asked to go and buy a new ticket or to perform a new reservation and so on and so forth. If he has to arrive late at the airport because of delay in the railway system and has to go in a priority queue. We don't want this to be difficult for the passenger itself, but we want to basically distribute certificates, credentials that are validated by the ledger to allow the passenger to go through a red tape, through his gate at the airport in a very seamless way. This can be done with distributed ledger technologies. So this is also one thing we are exploring for Orchestra.
Very good. That was a very good answer, Michele. And for the audience, I would like to point out that Michele mentioned the COP, meaning the community of practitioners. And if you want to join a community of practitioners, please reach out, because the community of practitioners are getting first-hand information about the result in the project. It's an EU project, it's obviously open, and we will share it with everyone. But during the process, you get hands-on information, you get to talk to our partners, and you can join the workshops, which we will invite to. And also IOTA will be part of these workshops. So if you're interested to learn and hear more what IOTA is doing, also what Michele, the knowledge he has, not just only from IOTA's perspective, but in total of the IoT and the distributed ledger technology, please reach out to us, and we are happy to share more. Thank you, Michele, for your insights. I think this gives a good first starting point to understand more about the project, but also your doings. And also it gives a short introduction to what we are about to start delivering in the EU project Orchestra. And I would like to thank you, the audience, for listening into this. And if you have any comments or any feedback, please don't hesitate to contact us and reach out. And on behalf of the Orchestra team, thank you for joining this first podcast from Orchestra. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And looking forward to deliver this innovation for the multimodal transport system together.
Thank you.